So I would like to introduce our speaker tonight. Glenn Burns is a very well-seen personality on WSB-TV. He has been here in Atlanta for 35 years, I think you said now. Mm-hmm. And he's been around longer than I have, so that's kind of rare. As part of the celebration for the observatory and astronomy, I wanted to find somebody to give a talk on something other than research, because the telescope, although there is some research being done with the new one that we have, the 20-inch, for the most part it's used for public outreach and for the joy of just looking up at the sky and beginning to see something that you hadn't seen before, and the wonder and the awe. Glenn has been well known not only as an excellent weatherman, but he's always giving astronomical tidbits, and that's because he's an avid amateur astronomer. And I know just from the title of his talk that his presentation is going to be awe-inspiring, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Can you all hear me back there? And good. I promised, and it's an honor to be here to speak to you all tonight. Very great honor. It's usually first and second graders, and it's I have a red sweater, and it's wonderful to be here tonight. I promised my staff I would ask you all a question. It's been a bad weather week, to say the least. After yesterday, Georgia now leads the nation in the number of tornadoes. So that was kind of a bad distinction there. How many here get their weather information and weather alerts from TV? I knew it. I knew it. How many from an app? Yeah, that's the way we're all going. That's the way we're all going. As Jim mentioned, I started 35 years ago in Atlanta when I first came to WSB-TV. There were 3 major networks, and it was kind of a monopoly. And weather was just, you know, it was stone knives and bearskin rugs compared to what we have today. I had a magnetic board with magnetic clouds and lots of magic markers. And we used to get a satellite picture every day. Every day. And now we get one every minute with the new GOES-R satellite. But when I first started, I came in during a horrible ice storm. A couple of weeks later, there was a major outbreak of tornadoes. And I remember it was a very good day. It was in the Weather Center. It was an absolutely gorgeous, pristine blue sky, and it was in April. And then I get a phone call. I'm just going to tell you this little story because it was very much like today. I got a phone call from a woman who says, "Where's the tornado?" And I said, "Ma'am, there's no tornado." I said, "It's a beautiful day." She said, "It's going across the bottom of my screen. There's a tornado warning out for Cobb County. Where is it?" I said, "Ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about." I'm thinking, oh my God, this control room is running the crawl of a tornado warning by accident. So I was polite. I said, "Thank you, I'll go check it out." I run down to the control room, to master control. I said, "What are we issuing? What are you putting on the air?" "I don't know what you're talking about." I said, "Oh, she must have been watching WGN or something up in Chicago. Same kind of 3 letters, WSB, WGN, maybe." So that's where they had some bad weather. 20 minutes later, she calls back. "Why are you issuing the tornado warning? It's beautiful out." I say, "I know it's beautiful out. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm really mad. I'm really mad. You're issuing a tornado warning. You're irresponsible. Who is your boss? Who is your boss?" I said, "Well, his name is Greg Stone. He's our general manager." Click. 5 minutes later, "Greg Stone, come down to my office." So, here we go. I just started at WSB, and this is the end of my career. I don't know what's going on. So he calls me down, and he said, "You know, what's going on? What are we issuing? I don't see anything on our air." I said, "This woman has called me, and then she's complaining that we're issuing a tornado warning," and I assure her we're not issuing any kind of a warning, Greg. I promise you that. 15 minutes later, I get a call from her husband. "I'm really sorry. She was watching a tape from 2 weeks ago." So you get some wonderful things in the Weather Center from time to time, and it was an April day, so I just thought I'd tell you about some of the joys that we face. Now, when I was about 5 or 6 years old, my vacation plans with my parents and grandparents, we were up in New York, And one of the things they wanted to do was take me to the planetarium, the Hayden Planetarium, Central Park. No clue what that was at 5 or 6 years old, but we went in, got our seats, it was dark, the music came up, everything was on the screen, it was amazing. I saw the planets for the very first time in my life, and I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked with that. So I told my grandparents my birthday was going to be coming up. I'd love to have a telescope. I'd love to see all this. I'm amazed at all this stuff. So they bought me this little red Tasco telescope, and I couldn't wait for it to get dark. And the moon came up, and we looked at the moon, and I saw the craters for the first time through my own little telescope, and I just could not believe what I was seeing out there. It was a whole different world than just looking up at the sky. I grew up in South Florida, and we used to go fishing all the time out in the ocean and look at the stars at night, and it was absolutely unbelievable. But looking at the moon through the telescope was just an amazing thing. Absolutely amazing. So I wanted to see where those big planets were. I wanted to see Jupiter's red spot. And so my grandfather, we found Jupiter, we pointed at it, and it was like, what? What is that little tiny thing there like that? There's no big red spot, but you could see 4 little things around it. And that still was amazing to me. And who discovered that? So my grandfather said, well, let's go look it up. We didn't have Google. Let's go look it up in the encyclopedia. It was a thing of books where you. So anyway, we looked it up in the encyclopedia, and it was Galileo that discovered that. My goodness, way back in the 1600s. What did he think when he looked in his telescope and he saw this little dot with these other little dots going around it? I mean, what could he possibly think about that? Well, anyway, my grandfather, and he was a great influence on my life, and he was kind of an amateur astronomer himself. And we visited Florence, and we actually got to see Galileos Telescope. It was actually during a transit of Venus a couple of years back. It was amazing to see. So finding out, when I was a kid that other stars were just suns like our own was a big revelation to me. So to this day, when I walk my dogs, when I come home and work at night, I find the Big Dipper, and there's the North Star with the 2 things out there, and I used to love to do that. And I wanted to learn everything I could after that. After I was at the planetarium, I just wanted to learn everything I could. I loved the names of the stars. I didn't know they had names. Polaris. I loved Betelgeuse, although I'm not sure that's exactly how you say it, but I love that name. And I love the constellation of Orion. So in elementary school, we had science class. We learned all a little biology, a little chemistry, a little astronomy, but you just didn't have good science teachers when I grew up in elementary school. Usually the coach that lost a bet or somebody else that got to be the science teacher. So it wasn't terrific. But one day, back in 1966, it was a Thursday night. That's a long time ago, right? This show came on. It was an Asian navigator, an African-American communications officer. And of all things, in 1966, during the Cold War, a Russian's weapons officer. A crazy captain who always wanted to get into a mess. But the guy that I identified with was the science officer, and his name, of course, was Spock. The crew would travel in a spaceship through the cosmos to seek out new life and new civilizations, and as luck would have it, aside from a few facial features, maybe some antennas, they all looked like us, and as luck would have it, every one of them spoke English. It was amazing. So, me, millions of other people saw Star Trek for the first time, and it was just amazing to see the vision that Gene Roddenberry had. Now, it was a crew made up of different people, different races. Everybody was getting along. It was absolutely amazing. Now, back in 1966, my father was the program director for the NBC station in Miami, Florida. So one day, William Shatner came to the station, and I got a chance to meet him. There he is. And so we had a great conversation, and I hadn't heard from him from 1966, and all of a sudden, he's on Twitter. We hook up again. I said, probably don't remember me, but you. He said, yeah, I remember that exactly. So we became kind of buddies for the last couple of years. I help him with his celebrity auction, and tonight he writes to you, and he says, warp speed ahead. Continue to enlighten and continue to encourage. Congratulations on your 10th anniversary of the Georgia Tech Astronomical Observatory. And that comes from Captain Kirk. So there you go. He was this close. He was this close to being here tonight. I mean, this close. He's up and filming with, he's doing a promo for the St. Jude's Children's Hospital. He's very big into charities. Almost here tonight, so the schedule was just not quite there. Well, a few years before Star Trek debuted on NBC, then President John F. Kennedy made what I thought was a remarkable speech. I remember watching it on the news. The president told the American people we would reach the moon by the end of the decade. Being a kid and knowing how long it took for Christmas to roll around, it was a long time. The end of a decade. Well, not being savvy to the politics of the day as a kid, I thought telling us we're going to explore space. I didn't realize it was for political motivations. It was a space race against Russia, and exploration wasn't really even considered. Nevertheless, it was going to be an exciting time, but it would be a long time, and a long time gallivanting across the cosmos at warp speed was probably not coming too soon. Well, I watched Star Trek. I loved that speech from John F. Kennedy, but I was so enthused about what we were getting into, the space race. We would eventually be traveling the cosmos at warp speed. It was a great thought. And I went to a really good high school after that terrible elementary school, and I had some great science teachers, and great teachers make all the difference in the world. So when astronomy came around, I was all into that. I was very excited, and it turned out to be a major disappointment for me. Seems that was this guy here who figured out that there was a cosmic speed limit of all things, and we would not be going around finding Romulans and Klingons and going to Beetlejuice. So there's now a big difference between science and science fiction. Nevertheless, the more I studied astronomy, the more I saw there were things in the universe that were absolutely more incredible than I ever imagined they would be. Black holes, quasars, galaxies that dwarfed our own Milky Way. The universe was an amazing place. Now, as Star Trek continued to gain popularity, there was really a huge interest in space. Planetarium saw a big surge. However, in 1969, that series was canceled during its 3-year run. It turned out to be pretty prophetic, though. James T. Kirk's communicator looks just like the flip phone that developed out there. So I was bummed out. We had little iPads as well. Now, the series was canceled. However, the real deal was coming. And I just turned 16 years old the day before, July 22nd, 1969. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed the year before. A lot of unrest in the country. The news was never good. I hated to watch the news at night. The United States needed something. The world needed something to bring it all together. So that something was about to happen. The world was about to witness the greatest achievement in human history. Humans were in outer space. We had left the Earth, and we were about to step foot on another world. My family and I were gathered around the TV that night. Neil Armstrong stepped off the ladder onto the surface of the moon. Everyone in my family let out a cheer, and I missed the first words. But, as luck would have it, we were watching Walter Cronkite. He could hardly hold his tears back. I remember this like it was yesterday. And he repeated those words, and it was one small step for man, and it truly was. And it was a giant leap for mankind. Now, as I watched all the reporters around Cape Canaveral, I thought, how great would that be to have that kind of a job? You're at Cape Canaveral, you're reporting there, you're seeing rockets take off. Oh, what an amazing thing. Well, I said, that's it. So I went to the University of Florida, obtained a journalism degree, and while there kept up with my astronomy courses, and upon graduation, my first job was in West Palm Beach, Florida at the NBC affiliate there. Now, one of the first stories I got to cover was the building and launch of the first space shuttle. Now, the name of the very first space shuttle, what would that be? Absolutely, Enterprise. Star Trek changed the world. It changed the world. Now we have it never went into space, of course, but the name of it was Enterprise. The entire crew of Star Trek was on hand to see the vehicle as it rolled out of the vehicle assembly building. And I love that building, by the way, that you see there. It has its own weather inside. If you've ever been to the VAB building in Cape Canaveral, it's amazing. Clouds are in there. So the entire crew was on hand to see the vehicle roll out of the assembling building. It never flew into space, but nonetheless proved how inspirational Star Trek was to everybody. A lot of those people in the space program were in the space program because of Star Trek. Now, NASA assigned me an astronaut to help with those technical aspects. His name was Colonel Alfred M Worden. He was the command module pilot for the first scientific expedition to the moon, Apollo 15. Now, on their way back from the moon, Colonel Worden climbed out of the space capsule, and he made the longest spacewalk to date in history. And he took several pictures between the Earth and the moon. That's Colonel Worden there. And let me show you the next picture. I have that in my basement. That's from him. That's halfway between the Earth and the moon, signed by Colonel Alfred M Worden. He is a very good friend, and he wanted me to read you the letter he's writing to you tonight. He says, "The stars hold a unique place in human history. We have looked at the stars for thousands of years and tried to understand how all we see, meaning the known universe, has occurred and what it all means. I had the privilege of looking at the stars that made up the universe from a vantage point of orbit around the moon during the flight of Apollo 15. It was an incredible sight that made me realize that we know very little about the space we live in. From the beginning of time, people have theorized about the meaning of the stars and the universe that we see, and that perception had gradually changed as we learned more and more about the heavens. Now with the Hubble Space Telescope, we're learning things we never dreamed of, and we are beginning to update our knowledge of the magnitude and character of the universe around us. Who would imagine that out of our own galaxy, the Milky Way, we would have 400 billion stars, and is only one of several billion galaxies in the known universe. As we look further and further into space, we'll learn more and more about how we fit into the framework of the heavens, and we will understand more about ourselves, where we came from, our place in the heavens, and what the future holds for us. Our future outlook will depend greatly on the discoveries of astronomers and their interpretation of the results." And that is from Colonel Alfred M. Worden to you all. Now, we used to host a big benefit in Palm Beach every year where I worked, and he'd invite all his astronaut friends there. So I got to meet Alan Shepard, Michael Collins, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and John Glenn. And one of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my life was one night at this big benefit. Neil Armstrong would not be able to be there because he sprained his ankle playing tennis the day of the event. But Buzz Aldrin was there. And I did not know this at the time, but I was introducing Buzz Aldrin, and I said, "Here is the second man to walk on the moon." Ooh, that was not good. He did not like to be called the second man to walk on the moon. So that was a little sneer, but we had a good time anyway. Now, when I worked at Channel 5 again in NBC in West Palm Beach, Florida, we had a great time working at the station. But one time there was somebody there that saw me and worked at Minneapolis at the NBC station there. So he called me and said, "Would you like to come and work in Minneapolis as the chief meteorologist?" I said, "Absolutely. We'll double in pay. That wasn't bad. So that was a good move. So weather was a lot more fun up there than being in Palm Beach, Florida. It's going to be sunny, hot, and humid. Sunny, hot, and humid. But we had weather in Minneapolis. So the one good thing that they were going to pay for my graduate work at the University of Minnesota in astrophysics. So I did the 2 years of that. So I did rather well with that. Got my credentials, I did meteorology and astrophysics and got all my credentials and was certified there. So I was doing rather well at the University of Minnesota. And one of my astronomy professors asked me one day, he said, would you like to come with me to do some research? And I said, well, where are we going? He said, we're going to go to the VLA telescope in New Mexico. Oh, what is that? Well, radio astronomy was a little more of an infant stage at that point in time. But that was in the high desert of New Mexico. And I said to my news director at the time, I'd like to go out, do some of this research for my schoolwork, and I think it would be a great series. I don't think a lot of people know what's going on out there. We have a local angle with our professor from the University of Minnesota. So let's go out and do that. Okay, did that. And so we were out at the VLA telescope. It's an array of telescopes. I know you've all probably heard of it and seen it, a big Y shape in the desert of New Mexico. So I'm out there with Dr. Larry Rudnick, and we're putting giant tapes on the computers and doing all kinds of fun stuff. But after a little while, it gets a little boring. We were studying quasars, actually. And so one afternoon, we're getting ready to go in. We did about 2 hours of research. And I said, I got to get out of here. I said, I need a little break from this. So I walk out, and it's dark. It didn't matter which day or night when you're using radio astronomy. But I walk out, and I look down the array of scopes, and at one of the dishes was a film crew. I mean, a big film crew, like a movie. I had a photographer with me. This is a lighting guy, there's a sound guy, there's a producer, the lights, everything's lit up. I'll go down to check this out. So I go down, and as it turns out, there's another astronomer there shooting a segment called Cosmos. I got to meet him. You see that dish right there? At night, we crawled up through that. Both of us got through the hatch, and we sat back and looked at the stars. One-on-one with Carl Sagan? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? This guy was so smart. But what he did was so incredible. He put everything into a way that everybody could understand it. And he'd tell me about Johnny Carson. He'd be on the Johnny Carson show. And, you know, I watched him on Johnny Carson before I even saw this, before I even met him. And then when he actually says billions, it's like, oh my God, I know that. I know that. So he was an incredible inspiration. After that, I was just like, this is just unbelievable to actually meet Carl Sagan. So after 3 years in Minneapolis, literally walking around campus in knee-deep snow, and I'm not kidding you, carrying books and all that, my wife said, haven't you had enough yet of this? I mean, it was flurrying the first week in June. WSB called and said, would you like to come down? I said, what's the temperature? They said, 77. Yes, I would. Yes, I would. So when I came down for the interview, I said, you know, I do a lot of science stuff, and I'd like to be not only your chief meteorologist, I'd like to be your station scientist, because I love science. I do all kinds of stuff. So they encouraged me to do more science reports, and one of the most memorable experiences was the launch of the final Space Shuttle mission, which occurred on July 8th, 2011. Now, I was down at the Kennedy Space Center, and it actually landed on my birthday, July 21st. It left an empty feeling inside me when it landed. And you know, you look around at all of the NASA scientists, and I had, you know, with my friend Al Worden, I said, we had some good inside areas to be and where most of the people would not have access to. And the scientists and guys, and we're all looking around, and they're crying. Everyone's crying. It was the end. It was the end of an era. There's no more space shuttle. There was no more plan to do anything in space. And it was just an incredible thing to see. I mean, the whole NASA society there was just, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, it was a terrible era to end there. I mean, Star Trek ended, I felt kind of the same way there. Now, I think many of you may have seen a movie that was called The Right Stuff. Now, it's a true story of the beginning of the American space program. The beginning actually occurred in the high desert of Edwards Air Force Base. A rocket plane named Glamorous Glennis took off and made history on October 14th, 1947. A test pilot by the name of Chuck Yeager was the first pilot to break the sound barrier, paving the way for faster and faster aircraft for our rockets. That's my fishing buddy. I go fishing with Chuck Yeager up in Tennessee. He wanted me to tell you tonight. Humans are explorers. It's part of what makes us human. Keep the exploration of our universe going, and congratulations on 10 years of exploring space. That man, this guy is so fearless. You saw the movie The Right Stuff? How many saw that movie? What he did was go into a rocket plane, no parachute, and every single one of them before crashed. And they said, how would you like to drive our rocket plane? And he said, well, how much are you going to pay me? Because the guy before wanted $150,000. And that was in 1947, so it was like $1 jillion. So he said, how much are you going to pay me? And they said, how much do you want? And he says, Air Force is paying me anyway, let's go. So he was out with his wife at this place called Poncho's. It's a little bar out in the high desert, just kind of a rat trap. So the night before, he could down a few. So he got on a horse, and he and his wife took off down the desert, like racing. He fell off the horse and broke his ribs. The day before, he's going in this rocket plane to break the sound barrier. So his good friend, his name was Ridley. He went to Ridley the morning before, and he's holding his ribs, and how are we going to get, I can't even close the door of the rocket plane. I'm going to lose this. I'm not going to make history. Ridley got him a little broom handle from the janitor. He goes into the plane, and he locks it down, and boom, there he does. October 14th, 1947. Breaks the sound barrier and does a couple of barrel rolls just to prove he's the best pilot there ever was. And he certainly was. He certainly was. Now, a couple of months ago, I was out at another observatory. It was the Mount Wilson Observatory. That's me there looking. I didn't actually look through the telescope. You don't do that anymore, like that. But it was fun to just pose for that picture. The guys are showing me all of that stuff. So that's entertained some pretty nice people in the past, like maybe you've heard of Edwin Hubble. Einstein guy again, I was pretty mad at him. But I was very honored. See that guest book there? I was asked to sign that. That was signed by Albert Einstein. His signature's there along with Edwin Hubble. That was pretty exciting to do that. So one of the most exciting discoveries in astronomy has been the discovery of the exoplanets now. Among those, we've had recently discovered 7 in the habitable zone. Unbelievable. That's not really what interests me. Those planets, 7 or 40 light years away, that's fine. Liquid water's likely to be there. We're going to find life there, maybe. But the one that has my attention is called Tabby Star. Have you heard of it? Tabby Star. There's something extraordinary going on there. There's something weird that's orbiting Tabby Star. In fact, some have speculated it might be a Dyson sphere, or perhaps a large orbiting satellite or some sort of thing. Whatever it is different than anything else. And scientists have no clue yet what this could be. They might be surprised in a little while. Now, the Hubble Space Telescope, of course, was launched in 1990. turned out to be blind for about 3 years. Pictures were not that impressive, and then they had to really send up a space shuttle. Fortunately, we had the space shuttle and a good space program. They fixed the mirror, which was ground to 50/100ths the width of a human hair wrong. So they fixed that, and then this came out, the pillars of creation. The first time I posted this on Facebook, people just were gasping. They couldn't believe this was actually a real thing and how large it was, light years across. So just an astounding picture of the pillars of creation. Now, fortunately, again, we had a space shuttle to fix that, and it was worth the wait. Now, we're about to enter a new era in space telescope technology with the James Webb Telescope. It's expected to be launched in October of 2018. We can hope for that. The JWST will be a premier observatory of the next decade, serving thousands of astronomers worldwide. It's going to study every phase and history of our universe, ranging from the first luminous glows of the Big Bang, looking back perhaps a few 100,000 years after the Big Bang. The formation of our solar system, supporting life on planets, evolution of our own solar system, and I can't wait to see the first pictures coming in from there. Now, when I look through my 8-inch Celestron telescope at home, I show my grandchildren close-up views of the moon. They were pretty much amazed, except for my little grandson, Luke, who can tell you every Star Wars character there is, whatever planet is, and he'll look through and look at the planet Jupiter and go, "When are we going to Yogli Mogi, Grandpa?" It's not quite that exciting, but anyway, I just think astronomy is just an amazing thing. Now, I've also explained to my viewers on social media all about space from time to time. And of course, every time I post something great, you get the beam me up, Scotty, stuff like that. I mean, that's in our national icon. Again, Star Trek changed the world. So while Star Trek has certainly inspired generations, it got people thinking about space and boldly going where no man has gone before. Our new ground-based telescopes will also take us to places we have yet to imagine. Within the next 20 years, these telescopes will most likely lead us to the most profound discovery in human history: life outside the Earth. NASA firmly believes it is only a matter of a decade or two before we discover life outside our solar system. I, for one, cannot wait for that. I was extremely honored to be asked to speak to you tonight on this very special occasion. The telescope has been a big part of my life since I was in first grade, and the Georgia Tech Observatory continues to inspire. So as we continue to look to the cosmos, we may be looking back in time, but we're also, no doubt, going to discover our future. And thank you for having me tonight. Now, what a great observatory you have here. I love this device. Are you all familiar with this? It's a throwable microphone. Anybody have any questions? Because I really want to try it out. Anybody? Nobody has any questions about anything? Oh, good. Ready? Good catch.
Wait, okay, cool, it works. What exactly was your concentration in astrophysics? Did you have anything specifically that you studied?
No,
or
it was
just general?
It was just general astrophysics and meteorology and cloud physics. So it was all jumbled together. I wanted to go get my master's degree, but I just wanted to take more meteorology courses, and before I could complete that, WSB had called. I was here.
Was there anything in particular, while you were studying that interested you,
Quasars, without a doubt.
Okay.
Gamma rays,
Okay.
absolutely. Gamma rays, you just think of what would happen if something went supernova very close, how fragile we are. I've seen the modeling, so why don't you throw it somewhere? There you go.
If you could do it, would you hop on a spaceship and go up into space?
You want to know? I was second behind Geraldo Rivera to go into space. I was. And then the Challenger happened. So I was going. I had the connection. Yeah, I would have loved to do that. I can't imagine anything more spectacular than going into space. Oh, good. We can throw one back there.
That is cool, Michael. That is so cool.
I'm gonna pass it back. Oh. You don't play wide receiver.
Yeah, so I have a question. So you think that, well, NASA scientists say that it's very likely we'll discover life, or not likely, that they hope we'll discover life in the next 10 years or something like that. What do you think about Europa and the theory that there may be hydrothermal vents and complex life forms
Without
down
a
there?
doubt, I believe that there's certainly hydrothermal vents there. You can see eruptions on the planet, on the moon. So if we can send something there, the ice is so thick, we just need a device to get through that ice and to melt that ice to get down in there and then to transmit it back. We have the technology, I think, that we can do that. But certainly you've seen life around thermal vents here relying on chemical reactions and no photosynthesis going on. But I do believe, yeah, we're close to seeing that the technology is available. We just need to get there. We just need to get there. And I'm just so excited that we're probably going to find life within our own solar system. Maybe it's Mars, maybe it's Europa, maybe it's Io. One of those is going to have something. I just know it. The only thing that bothers me there is the radiation off of Jupiter. You have just the tidal forces are immense, but the radiation. Can life survive that kind of radiation? I don't know. I don't know. Anybody?
So how do you feel about the future missions to Mars as the next step in exploration in terms of like possible colonization maybe or future plans such as?
That's a great question, and I love the contemplation of going to Mars. Will we ever be able to create an atmosphere without a magnetic field? No, we can't do that. It's going to be blown off by the solar wind again. But I think Mars is so like us. I know we can probably find water there. I know we can probably colonize that in maybe a biosphere of some sort. I just think the challenge is there. It's going to be who's going to go? Who's going to go first? That's a long way to go to be cooped up in something that tiny. If you're claustrophobic, you're not going to make it there. But I think it's just so exciting. Don't you think it's exciting to go to Mars?
And for that matter, how do you feel how realistic the book The Martian is by Andy Walter?
Well, if you like potatoes, I thought the movie was great. I thought it was very plausible. I mean, you're looking for a communications, and he gets in his little truckster and goes off and finds that former satellite there and former rover and transmits everything back. And he's got he's a botanist. He's a botanist, so he can grow stuff. I thought it was pretty plausible. Didn't you all think it was pretty plausible scientifically? I did. I liked the movie. Throw her on down there.
Got it. So with the crazy climate right now, as far as scientists and politics go, how do you feel about science being attacked right now? And also, what is your favorite Star Trek character?
It's Spock, of course. It had to be Spock. Data's good too. Love Data. I communicate with him actually as well on Twitter. So yeah. You bring up an excellent point, and it's a very delicate subject. Climate change is so real. The things that I've seen in 35 years are crazy. Back in the day, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Tornado Alley. Well, now it's Dixie Alley. It's us. It's all shifted. Climate is changing. I do not understand the mindset of not addressing this. It is just unfathomable how you don't address climate change. Even if you don't believe climate change, 2 million people a year are dying from pollution worldwide. Even if you don't believe in climate change. And you know, I just watched the debates go on. There's a guy named Joe Bastardi. You see him on Twitter all the time, and he's arguing in favor that it's not real. Other scientists, there's Marshall Shepard at this other school across near Athens, that I love when you beat them. That they debate all the time, and I watch this debate, and people say, "Oh, CO2 is naturally occurring." Yeah, but not that kind. It's a different CO2 in the atmosphere. So it's got to be addressed. And I think another thing that we need to do, yes, can we mitigate that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we can mitigate it. I think we need to donate more money to deal with it. I mean, you look back at civilizations that couldn't deal with climate change, like the Mayan Empire. They didn't know how to deal with it. We need to learn how to deal with climate change. It's going to be inevitable one way or the other. Climate's been changing for billions of years. But we're accelerating it, I think. And I watch you look at El Nino and La Nina, the ocean temperatures, natural variability of the atmosphere. And it's not being overwhelmed by climate change yet. It's close, but there are some weird things that are happening. Atmospheric rivers, drought in California, and everybody says, oh, this is going to last another decade, and then the floods come the next day. The weather seems to be getting more unpredictable. And 5-day forecast, people say, why don't you do a 7? Well, I'm working on tomorrow, really. Tomorrow. I just want to get through tomorrow. So, yeah, I see your point, and I think basically we need to learn how to deal with it. We need to mitigate some of the things we're doing as far as pollution. I think we're doing an okay job, but the rest of the world has got to climb on board as well. Really do.
What are your thoughts on space tourism?
You mean like Virgin going up and that?
Yeah.
You know, he invited Obama to go up. I don't know whether he's going to do it, but he's brilliant. He's brilliant. I think that's a great thing to do. Are we going to monetize space? Well, why not? Would you go? You would go? How far would you go, to the moon or just like an orbit? I'd go to the moon too, absolutely. Absolutely go to the moon. A couple little issues with the SpaceX rocket recently, but that can be worked out. But yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea to do that. Oh, well.
Yeah, somewhere.
Are we okay?
Okay, thank you.
Jacket.
Oh no.
Anyway, hello.
Hi.
Gosh, I have someone's root beer in my eye.
Oh, sorry. That's a first.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I guess the space race kind of kicked off like a new era of space exploration that seems to have kind of wound down. But what do you think could be some sort of inciting incident in the future that could like rekindle interest in space exploration?
Oh, that's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. Yeah, I think it's the need to go into space. Do we need something? When you look at people say, we're going to go back into space, and we wasting all that time. We could be donating the money here, we need the money there, we need the money. They have no clue as to what happened when we went to space. Where do they think Velcro came from? All kinds of computer technology was developed because there was a need for it. So there's going to be a need to go back into space. What would that need be? Well, you can create all kinds of stuff. Medicines, alloys. You can mine an asteroid, like for trillions of dollars. One asteroid's worth trillions of dollars. But the need, I think, is something that the technology is going to eventually have to go that way. You're going to have to develop technologies in space. It's going to be that need where if we're going to go to Mars, we need to develop stuff in space. We can't just go there and take off from Earth. We need a stepping stone, like a moon base. So I think it's going to be the need to develop technology that gets us back into space.
Okay, I just want to ask a question
Oh,
first.
sure, yes.
What is your favorite Star Trek episode?
It has to be, I think, The Wrath of Khan, I think. Yeah, I think that one.
So Space Seed, where they introduced Khan, or the movie The Wrath of Khan?
Oh, The Space Seed, the first one, the original
Okay.
series. Yes, with, forget that, Ricardo Montalban.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay, who next?
All right, so I guess speaking for the students in the room, what do you think is something that we can do as freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors here in undergrad to best, I guess, satisfy the need for either a space race or a moon base or something of that regard? Or I guess furthering science in general
What you can use to further the science?
as undergrads?
Exploration is the key. Just looking out with the telescope and making these discoveries is going to want us to get us there. You know, when I saw Star Trek, I wanted to go there. So the more that we can discover here with Earth-based technologies, there's this telescope, there's one in the desert, which is about to peer into the inside of our galaxy to see the black hole that lies in our galaxy. We can see those little suns going around, little stars going around that thing, but we're about to make a major discovery on that, to actually see the black hole in the middle of our galaxy. I think it's the discoveries that we can make with ground-based observations that'll get us back into space. Even the space-based telescopes like Hubble or the ones that are like Kepler, discovering these planets. If we see something out there from our Earth-based telescopes and the research that you can do with all of that data here on the ground, it's going to get us back there. I want to see us get back there. We have a mission going to Jupiter. Will we get to see some of the moons and what they're going to look like close up and do some actual science once we get there rather than taking pictures? That would be great. But the more we can do on the ground with the data we get from these ground-based telescopes and space-based telescopes is going to get us back into space, I think.
If I can throw it well enough, it can be a bigger one.
That was a good one.
Thank you so much for coming tonight.
My pleasure.
I've been following you for all 35 years.
I've been there.
I want to know if you're going to be participating in the March for Science here in Atlanta on April 22nd.
I wasn't aware of it.
Yep, big march from Candler Park.
I'm there.
Great.
I'm there.
Everybody here, I'm your grandmother. I always wanted to go to space. When we first walked on the moon, I was in Disneyland in California, in Tomorrowland.
Oh, wow.
Looking at the mock-up of what they thought the rocket would look like when we went to the moon. And about 10,000 of us were collectively watching, and that's when we didn't have a screen. That was that big.
Oh.
And we looked up at the moon, and we looked at the screen, and we looked at the rocket, and we looked at the moon, and that was the day Tomorrowland became Todayland.
Wow. Wow. You know, there's some things that we're going to discover that we haven't even thought about yet. I mean, space is stranger than we can imagine. You know, I'll tell you something that happened to me, and I don't. What I'm about to tell you, I have not told anybody really, but I'm an avid boater, fisherman. So my wife doesn't like me going out alone, but what the hell? I like to go fishing. So I went out of Palm Beach Inlet, and my friends always kid me up here, oh, you're going into the Bermuda Triangle. Oh, come on, get real. So I'm out on the water, beautiful sunrise. It's about 6:30 in the morning. Put the outriggers out on the boat, getting ready to put the baits out, and I'm by myself. It's gorgeous, there's no one out. I can't see anybody. And I'd look out there, and I'm looking at the water. It's something the size of about a football field. The water was churning. Now, I had a broken gas gauge at the time. I didn't know how much gas I had left. I'd have to open up a hatch and look at that manually, so it's on my dashboard, and I got my GPS, and it followed me all the way out of the inlet, out to the ocean. I'm about 20 miles offshore of Palm Beach. There's this giant, what I think is a school of fish, churning the water the size of a football field. Oh my God, we're gonna have dinner. Gun the boat, I get over there, and it's not fish. There are waves at about 3 feet high, and surrounding it as the water is dead calm, like a lake. So this is weird. So I just put it up there, and all of a sudden, boom, something hits me. My neck snaps back. And I was like stunned. So I just looked around to see where my bearings were. My gas gauge is now working. The track on my GPS is gone, wiped out. The water dissipates. Everything's now flat calm. And I look where the inlet was supposed to be, and I'm about 10 miles north of that inlet. And I'm looking at what's from Palm Beach to what's called Jupiter. And I see the Jupiter lighthouse. And there's no way in hell I was that far north. There are some strange things out there, I assure you. And it took me several days to tell anyone about this, my friends. So I call up, I said, I don't know what this was. It was the strangest thing that ever happened to me in my life. I call my friend at AUTEC. He's a sub base in the Bahamas at Andros Island. So he's a commander there. He's a sub-commander. I said, you all have a submarine by any chance doing some experiments off of Palm Beach? He said, how deep were you? They were about 600 feet. He goes, no, we wouldn't be that shallow. Damn. Called the Coast Guard station at Peanut Island. I said, you're not going to believe this. And they said, didn't you used to work at Channel 5 here? I said, yes, that was me. I told them, we don't have any idea what that could have been. So you look up at the night sky when you're out fishing and you see the stars and you can see satellites, but there are some strange things going on out there. Strange. And to this day, I have no idea what that was. That was 4 years ago. Never seen anything like it before or since, but just want to let you know.
Still go out alone?
No, I don't go out alone anymore. Any other, yes?
What do you think the likelihood will be that we'll ever invent a space elevator?
I get a letter from those guys every so often about the space elevator. It's kind of, I said the first time I saw that, I was like, you gotta be kidding me, right? But it's plausible. The technology could be there. Wouldn't that be fun? Going up into space on an elevator, it's plausible. I mean, it beats some engineering, and you guys are the ones that can do that. But yeah, space elevator, that's very Star Trek-y, but good. I think it's an excellent idea. Can I get to throw it? Ready? Good shot.
Nice throw. Okay, so from the sounds of it, you've had a lot of amazing experiences with personal interactions with science and people. What was the most memorable thing that's ever happened to you, whether that be meeting someone or something like your boating trip?
Oh, well, that was the most. The boating trip was the scariest, yeah. I think just being able to sit on the front porch of my friend, the astronaut's house, watching a full moon rise and saying, you went there, didn't you? You went there. He had some interesting stories too, but I'm not at liberty to tell you that. Let's just say that we're not alone. We're not alone. But I think that was it. I think sitting down with an actual astronaut that went to the moon was probably just one-on-one, having him as a friend, just being able to pick his brain and tell stories. A lot of fun. Knowing General Yeager, a guy that fearless, that broke the sound barrier in a rocket plane that didn't have a parachute or a way out. William Shatner's, well, when you'll see him. I'll bring him here. Next time, I'll bring him.
Thank you.
I hate to interrupt with these questions, but let's thank Glenn for coming and speaking. And I believe he can stay for a little while if you want to come down and talk to him.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure. Very good.